Hello there. And so my name is Neil McGee, and I'm chairing this particular event from Leicester Business Voice regarding the climate emergency. I really do welcome you on this vital subject. Thank you for being interested. I have to do some, by the way, I'm ably assisted by the guys at Starcom, and thanks for that, and also Robin Poynton, who is our chair. So some housekeeping. We only plan to keep you for an hour. And you will not be able to see any of the other attendees if you've not used webinar before. But we would like you to find the chat column on the right hand side of the webinar and add any questions in there in the chat area, and that will help stimulate discussion at the end of the event, which is going to be about 12:35. So in terms of housekeeping, please keep your comments in there, and we'll pick them up because there may be duplication, etc., etc. Finally, our aim is basically here in the short time allowed to inform. In this instance, LBV both informs our members and also influences those people who are making decisions based on what our members feel is important. In this case, it's definitely an informing thing. We will just be therefore skimming along the top of this for you, but hopefully you'll find it interesting enough to dig in and ask more questions. The webinar and any questions, and presentations will be available on our website, www.lbv.com. So we've got 4 people, each with very different positions, and the names just popped up here. And without any further ado, as people like to say in these things, I will jump straight into Dr. Shamir Ghumra. Let me just call up, if I may, sorry about this. Appointed as Vice Chair of the IOD, which is actually quite important to quite a few of us in this area, but is also, in this particular case, Global Director of the world's first Building Sustainability Rating System, BREEAM. The scheme has certified over 500,000 buildings, has over 2 million registered assets in 87 countries. It's also responsible for the BREGroup, internal audit and risk functions, along with digital tools for health and safety and resource management. Dr. Shamir specializes in supply chain governance, ethical sourcing, climate change, and green finance, and also sits on the Professional Standards Committee for the IEMA and is a chartered environmentalist. Shamir started his career in the quarrying sector in Leicester. Excellent. So straight over to you, Shamir.
Lovely. Thanks very much indeed, Neil, and a great pleasure and opportunity to just address some of the Leicestershire Business Voice members on this particularly important topic. You don't have to go too far, do you now, in terms of the news and the media everywhere around us, even particularly in recent days and weeks, with significant personalities and leaders talking about the climate emergency and the scale of the challenges and indeed the opportunities that can come along with that. And we're seeing a lot more narrative, particularly against the backdrop of COVID-19, and how the world and humanity has had to form a global response to COVID, and how can we sort of galvanize the same kind of sense of urgency and purpose in relation to the climate emergency that we face and have faced for an awfully long time. Next slide, please. So what I wanted is perhaps just set the scene in terms of this initial 10 minutes that I've been asked to kind of talk to about the climate emergency. In terms of the sense and the irreversible nature of what is happening around us, I think the agenda has moved on significantly in recent years, where it is undeniable that this is happening all around us and that we have to respond. And how do we respond? We've seen an awful lot of activity and engagement from governments around our world. Our own government was actually quite pioneering in setting out our carbon regulations legislative instruments and the policy targets that we've now got in train, and the carbon budgets that obviously have a role to play. Lots of other interventions that we see happening at a national and local level to really help provide a framework within which we can provide some solutions and actions for organisations, for businesses to have a better handle on what their own impacts are, how can they better manage them, and how can they actively do something proactive to help themselves, in their organisations, their businesses, as well as clearly helping contribute to the climate emergency and forming a collective and cohesive response. Next slide, please. So what I was asked to do was just maybe quickly draw upon some various aspects. In particular, I believe a number of the participants today on the call are here from SME organisations in Leicester and Leicestershire area. So what does it kind of mean? And I think sometimes there's a sense of how can we, as individuals and as leaders of organisations and others, actively make a contribution and do something meaningful? How do the small components add up to something significant? And we see a whole range of things are kind of evolving in this landscape. If we just take some of these on face value, what you can see here on the slide, a lot of policy activity, and I think we're going to see more and more of that coming through, both at a national and local level, through incentivizations, either through tax regimes, carbon pricing, and a range of other sort of policy levers that there'll be opportunities to pull on. How do we see the physical risks actually playing through in terms of property, resilience to flooding, energy shortages, the energy profile that we've got, obviously more announcements of late, particularly in terms of renewable energy, and broadly those things are clearly positive in nature, but how do we kind of make sure we're optimizing the usage and accessibility of such energy mechanisms for smaller businesses and for communities at large, in our context clearly in the Leicester area. So there's lots of things happening in terms of reputational, consumer demand, behaviour, expectations in the market, people perhaps becoming more socially conscious and aware of what an organisation's performance is. There's so much more disclosure now, and probably more disclosure becoming required through mandatory reporting and other instruments, that we've got to really see what those opportunities are and help businesses sort of navigate their way through to get to those sort of better outcomes and performance requirements that clearly a better business, better governance will lead to for an organisation, particularly looking at through this lens of the climate emergency. Next slide, please. So I thought I'd also just pick up on other aspects that I'm particularly involved with, which hopefully some of these may affect some people on the call, and maybe at least spur some sort of further thought and conversation, we hope, in the ensuing chat after obviously all the speakers have had their turn. So how do we really seize the opportunity to accelerate the growth towards a more sustainable economy? And how do we build back better? Lots of these sort of sound bites that we're hearing regularly now from government and industry and business leaders is becoming ever more present in sort of the vernacular of day-to-day business. So ESG, if that's not a term people have come across, environmental social governance, is becoming ever more apparent, particularly in my sector, in the built environment. How are organisations, investors, financiers really looking to accelerate growth and better performing buildings? We all occupy a building for most part of our daily life, particularly if we're now working from home or in the office or whatever the future might be, some sort of hybridized system of the two. The TCFD, the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, is again another policy vehicle that we're seeing emerge, particularly in the built environment and investor sector. More conversations around low carbon technologies, services, low carbon heat, and these other things. So how do we make sure these aspects are kind of fed into our own decisions, whether it's investment in our own physical buildings, aspects of improving our own homes as individuals, Obviously, there's other grants and other measures available, others may well talk to, but it's really about understanding what that benefit can be and payback periods and so forth, which we've obviously been looking at for some time. So there's an awful lot in all of this that we can start to kind of unpack and realize that actually there's a significant opportunity, even to talk about transportation as well, the buildings and how we use them. How does that lend itself to protection of habitat as well? These things are all inherently interconnected, and I think that's why it gives us such a sense of hope, particularly to kind of make these improvements, to put these mitigation measures in place to be more adaptable, which will actually help organisations and businesses not only ride out these challenges, but potentially even be more competitive and more agile as a result. Next slide, please. So I think this is probably the last slide anyway. So there's an awful lot in here that we can expand and unpack, perhaps in the conversation that follows, because we're giving sort of quite clear timelines for these sessions. But there are clearly some challenges that we've gone through. There's more to come, unfortunately, because of the impacts of COVID. The impacts have not been felt equally amongst our communities and society, and I think that's something we have to acknowledge. And similarly, the impact on greening the environment and making these measures to make more sustainable economy need to be felt more equitably. And I think there's a big role to play for creating a more just society, an equitable society community in Leicester and other parts of the country and around the world, as new opportunities do arise. New jobs will be created as part of this green recovery, Build Back Better and all these things that we're hearing. Different models around, more recently, obviously, we're hearing around needing to kind of reset how we interact with capitalism. And as people talk about service models, there's business aggregators, there's other approaches now that the digitization of many parts of the economy have now allowed us to serve the market in different ways than perhaps we even thought about before. So hopefully I've very, very quickly there just given you a taste and kind of a top line view of the bigger challenges running around in relation to the climate emergency, some aspects of hope, and the opportunity I think that there is certainly for businesses, organisations, but locally at a national level and around the world. So hopefully that's given you some food for thought. I'll hand back over to Neil now. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's really good. So we've, as you can see in front of you now, set up some quick polls. Has COVID-19 changed your perspective on the climate emergency? Has it made it more important, less important, or no change? Perhaps you'd like to select one, and that will then go into our poll. Thank you. Okay, that's interesting. Okay, so has COVID made the perspective? Yeah, okay, maybe without the aeroplanes and everything else, it's really drawn people's minds to how things can be different. So we tend to immerse ourselves in our day-to-day. Thank you very much. Right, our next presenter is Gavin Fletcher, as the name suggests. And in terms of, sorry, I'm just failing to call up. Oh dear, sorry, Gavin. I've let you down in terms of your CV. Gavin and I have met briefly a few times now across with the LEP, and he is the man that is pulling together a lot of the LEP's investments and interests across the counties in our area, but also keeping us on song. So with that, a terrible introduction, Gavin, go ahead.
Don't oversell me, will you? Thanks very much. Thanks, Neil. So my name is Gavin Fletcher. I'm a Regional Senior Energy Projects Officer based in Midlands Energy Hub as part of the LEP. Next slide, please. So just as a bit of an introduction, and it was really interesting just listening to what Shamir was saying before, and you'll see some of the links in what I'm going to be talking about. The Midlands Energy Hub is funded through central government, and there are 9 offices based in the 9 LEPs across the Midlands. So as I said, I work in the Leicester and Leicestershire Enterprise Partnership, very much as part of the LEP team. Next slide, please. I think it's interesting sort of listening to the framing of this subject and then thinking about where the LEP is in terms of zero carbon. So at the moment, the LEP funds a number of zero carbon projects. It has set out how zero carbon runs through local industrial strategy, and it is in the process of setting out what zero carbon means for the local recovery strategy. The LEP also links into wider funding through the Midlands Energy Hub, and so we, for example, we're currently working with Midlands Connect and Midlands Engine, looking at how electric vehicle charging infrastructure needs to be set out across the Midlands, and there is obviously a local element to that. Midlands Energy Hub is also just about to start a piece of work looking at what the local low carbon goods and services sector is in Leicester and Leicestershire, and therefore what the business interests are locally. And I think that's a really important aspect of sort of what comes next in my presentation, because really unless we understand what the sector looks like locally, we won't really have a good solid view of how we therefore grow it and what the opportunities are. So it's really important that the LEP is undertaking this piece of work and starting to understand the sector better. So we'll go on to the next slide, please. In terms of business opportunities, a lot of what I'll be talking about is still quite sort of in the future. There are some things that are starting to come through and starting to show now, which will have business opportunities attached to them. But again, that does go back to that question of what is the size of the sector locally. So when we talk about business opportunities, a lot of the opportunities that are coming through are around these big societal changes that Shamir was also referencing. And those started with the government commitments around zero carbon by 2050, but they're now starting to be reflected more locally. So Midlands Engine have a document that's recently come out about building back stronger, better and greener in the Midlands. And that sets out a number of areas of development around renewables, future fuels, transport and electric vehicles, but also other types of mobility as well. And so what we will start to see as documents like that start to take hold is opportunities to invest in renewable installations, to carry out some of those installations, to look at how we implement research and development in terms of storage and future fuels. And there will be additional business opportunities alongside that around, for example, electrical connections and how we connect into the grid, or links into building and people's energy use. Transport is a lot closer. So in terms of the electric vehicles are very viable now, and they're very much growing in popularity. And alongside that, the infrastructure, the charging infrastructure, is really starting to be embedded. There are obvious opportunities around technology parts of that, but then there are also links to how we just shift some of our traditional sectors. So, for example, electric vehicles, how do we sell second-hand electric vehicles? There's just a little shift in skills in order to get the information that customers need. Equally, how we maintain, MOT, service electric vehicles will also be of need. There's a massive skills agenda with all of this, how we shift and train and upskill or reskill people in the new jobs and new sectors as they come around. And then there's national government funding, which will start to drive changes in what we do. So the example there is the Green Homes Grant. There is a share of £300 million coming through the Midlands Energy Hub, which will be looking at energy efficiency of households. And alongside that, there's a training programme being rolled out over the next 6 months. And so that is looking at how we enable local businesses to take part in the installation of energy efficiency measures. So not only do we bring the benefits to the households, but we also try and look at the local economy. I think, Neil, does that mean I'm close to finishing? Close, okay. Then the next bit that Shamir talked about was around supply chain legislation, corporate social responsibility. So we will see pressures coming from all three of those areas that will start to demonstrate those energy savings and start to put pressure on businesses to demonstrate what they're doing. Just go quickly onto the last slide. The last slide shows a number of areas of resource for either direct support for businesses through Leicester University, for example, grants through Green Bell, which I'm sure Anna will touch on, and then other areas where you can get information or advice on what you can do within your businesses. The Carbon Trust is really good on that supply chain legislation and corporate social responsibility. So I'll finish there. Quick whistle stop tour, but thanks very much for listening.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And before doing the quick poll, do have a look at those links, because there is a lot of activity and, dare I say it, energy and enthusiasm and opportunity within this sector for businesses to change perhaps what they're doing. There's innovation grants, there's all sorts of things. Get someone in your business, I really recommend it, to have a look at the whole area, because there could be some huge opportunities whilst we're dealing with this COVID rubbish, pardon my French. Anyway, next quick poll. Has the importance of climate emergency to your business changed over the last five years? Has the importance of the climate emergency to your business changed over the last 5 years? Is it more important, less important, or has there been no change? Thank you. Already. There we go, bish bash bosh, as they say. Right. So the next speaker is Anna Dodd, and is the Energy and Sustainability Manager at Leicester City Council. And her team is coordinating the authority's response to the climate emergency and delivers energy efficiency projects in the city. So as one of the biggest stimulators of activity in our part of the world, Leicester City Council is vital. So over to you, Anna.
Thank you, Neil. I'm going to speak very briefly this morning about our climate emergency strategy and action plan, and then in a little more detail about the Green Bell project, which is for SMEs to make energy savings and reduce carbon. So next slide, please. So we have declared a climate emergency as a City Council back in February 2019. And then we spent a while producing draft proposals, and between October and February 19, November 19 to February 20, just before COVID struck, we did a big climate emergency conversation across the city involving representatives from all sectors of the city, and 2 climate assemblies for young people and for citizens in the city, which were representative of the city's population. And that whole consultation process collected over 4,000 responses to our questions around the emergency, and really gave the City Council a mandate to move forward putting together a climate emergency plan. So we've then produced a draft strategy and plan. We've consulted with a group of experts on that who suggested various revisions. Those experts were from the universities and the county council, and then the plan is about to be launched in a few weeks' time. Next slide, please. So the areas for action that it covers are listed there, and at work is obviously a key one of those, and that's really what we want to talk about some more today. There's a big opportunity, as Shamir said and Gavin said, to actually do things differently, to look at innovation across Leicester in how we deliver work, and the opportunities that the climate emergency gives us as people working and living in the city to do things differently, to innovate, create new work streams and green jobs. And that is going to be a big focus of the council's work, looking at the emergency going forward. So this morning then, next slide please, I'm going to focus on the green grant scheme that is delivered by the energy projects team in our energy and sustainability section. Next slide please. And it's focused around SMEs. So it offers grants to SMEs for low carbon and energy efficiency. And it's the first phase ran from 2016 to 2019, and we're now in the second phase. Next slide, please. So what it gives you as an SME is grants of up to £1,000 to £7,000, and then that has to be match funded by yourselves and allows you to put in energy efficiency measures. Next slide, please. And so these are our targets for the next round, this round. And you can see there the number of enterprises, 293 we want to reach in Leicester and Leicestershire, and 2,439 tonnes of CO2 equivalent. Next slide, please. So these are the kind of measures that can be supported through the Green Belt scheme, and they all relate to how you can deliver your business more efficiently. So it includes that whole range of measures that can be supported, from lighting through to PVs and energy efficient machinery. Next slide, please. So we have some case studies here of companies that have participated to date. So Sapka Engineering put in LED lighting and new gas blowers and destratification fans. They had a grant of £6,500 and they're saving about £1,200 on their heating and lighting bills. Next slide, please. Casepack, that's a before and after their lighting of their bays, had a £10,000 grant. They're now saving 59% of their CO2, but they're also saving £41,000 a year. Next slide, please. And finally, Barkbury Properties, which was a real estate and letting agent. So they got a grant of £4,000 to sort out their old boilers, and they're saving over £1,500 a year. So there we go. There's three great examples. Next slide, please, of small businesses in the city and county that are taking action and moving forward. So the achievements of the project in year one, phase one, were 92 SMEs and over £500,000 of grant awarded. Next slide, please. And phase two is currently running. Next slide. So there's 1.1 million of grant available, and the contact details for the project. Thank you very much, Neil.
Sorry to rush you, because I bet there's a lot of interest. Fine. You've absolutely generated a huge amount of interest already. Things we can actually do now, things where government is willing to help us improve, and you could be thought leaders in your area too. So really do jump onto this. I think it's extremely good. So, and the next quick poll is, should any of your current products or services be seen as improving the carbon picture of Leicester? Think about it. There could be opportunities for us to develop the way we do things and the services and products that we make that will actually be seen as improving the carbon picture of Leicester, whereas before perhaps it was only an also ran. So do any of your current products, and there we go. Good, 75%, fantastic. And we could use those to stimulate grants, to stimulate activity, to stimulate changes in business behavior. Thank you very much. So Marina Sykes is our next and final, I'm going to say informant, really. Thank you, Marina. Anna, your camera is still on, so that's fine.
Sorry.
And I've got, Marina, I have you down as the head of business-to-business partnerships at Octopus Energy. Is that still current?
Yes, that's still current.
Over to you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much to Leicestershire Business Voice for having me here. I just thought I'd speak a little bit about Octopus Energy and what we're doing specifically in Leicester, because I do think we are one of those businesses that is managing to take advantage of the drive towards net zero. So for those of you who don't know, we launched in 2016 to ultimately tackle the green revolution and climate change and push that forwards and crucially make it more affordable for everyone. So we use technology to make customer experience the best it could possibly be, and crucially make it efficient and affordable. And we use special flexible dynamic tariffs that actually help our customers use energy when it's cheaper and greener. And what we've been doing in Leicester was, well, in 2018, we started supplying businesses with energy and renewable energy, and we realised quickly just how important businesses are in the fight against climate change. And this slide is actually slightly out of date, but businesses do contribute towards 18% of the UK's greenhouse gas emissions. But more than that, they are much louder voices than individuals. In some cases, they actually have voices at a national level. So we thought, what better way than to really start showing businesses what they could do, as Shamir was saying earlier, about galvanizing others to kind of realize what they could do and how big their voices could be. So next slide, please. With Leicester Business Power, we launched a specific tariff that was dedicated to engaging disengaged businesses in Leicester who weren't really thinking that much about their energy and how they could play a part in reducing Leicestershire's carbon emissions. So we partnered with some fantastic partners in the area. So we partnered with Seaton Road Solar Farm up the road, and we also partnered with the King Richard III Visitor Centre, who was our first business on supply in Leicestershire for this specific tariff, and then also some fantastic local charitable partners such as the National Forest and Charity Link. So for every business that signs up to the specific Leicester Business Power tariff, they get powered by local solar energy. A donation is made on their behalf to Charity Link, which is a fantastic charity, and a tree is planted with the local national forest. So again, doing something good, moving on to renewable energy, but also contributing towards the local economy and local charitable causes. Next slide, please. I think businesses often get really passed by when we think about customer experience, and anything to do with businesses in the energy industry can be quite complex and tricky. So we wanted to make it as simple as possible for them to show them that they could take quite a simple step and actually do something quite significant. So we now supply 350 businesses now, but last year we held a kind of Leicestershire Green Power 250 to celebrate those businesses on supply, and we've done a lot of engagement in the local community. So educating school children on the importance of renewable energy and protecting our planet. We've held seminars and sustainability events with our partner, King Richard III Visitor Centre, and again celebrating those businesses on supply, because I do think it's really important to, I think sometimes you can feel a bit helpless when it comes to the climate change emergency, and by kind of re-instigating the little things that you can do and celebrating businesses when they are making steps to change their ways or reduce their energy consumption, it's a kind of a fantastic way for us to help those businesses. So just moving on to the last slide. We now have 350 businesses on supply, and it's helped to raise our profile in the area. So with our homes on supply as well, we kind of are able to save 3.5 million kilograms of CO2 in the area, which is fantastic. But for us, I think taking advantage and looking at the opportunities of climate change is about engaging with the disengaged, bringing a network of businesses together to show that they're more than the sum of their parts, and push for a lower carbon Leicester.
Wow, thank you very much, Marina. There's some great stuff going on in Octopus. It would appear to be a very energized company. I know you have particular tariffs, sorry about that, particular tariffs that people can buy into if you have electric cars or electric vehicles and stuff that make it much more efficient. I love the fact that you're getting involved in Leicester in particular. Okay, so first of all, I have to apologize to everybody for the amount of time that has been available for these wonderful speakers. The first one, if I may hideously summarize Dr. Shamir, was really why is this whole thing important? Hopefully we've now got a reason why it's very important, not only politically, not only financially, but also on behalf of the society and on behalf of the whole world. But all we have to do is do little things better to make a difference. That's the key. And also how the LEP, as an investor of central government money in our area, is really trying to stimulate activity which will generate these benefits. Then we move from the LEP staff to what the City Council is doing actively to help businesses, in particular, get involved. All of those are key, and also Octopus as a provider of energy up the pipe and down the pipe is actively involved in our area, and I think that's fantastic. So now I can't actually see questions. Could I just hear and also the other panelists come back on, and also turn your mics on if you haven't got any. So could someone read the questions for me, please?
Well, Neil, if I just kick off, I'm not that sure we're looking at, I don't think we've got any questions so far, but I've got one or two. So, just introduce myself. I'm Robin Poynton, the chair of Leicestershire Business Voice. A question really from Marina, just interested in the experience on the coalface, as it were, about barriers. So thinking about engaging with the businesses, and particularly the ones that in Leicester, what's kind of been the experience around the barriers, or the things that have come back as obstacles to saying, well, it's just too difficult? What kind of gets fed back to yourselves?
I think, I mean, quite boringly, but sometimes the barrier is just that businesses in the past have been stuck on very long-term contracts that they can't get out of, which can be really frustrating because they can be paying way too much for their energy, which is often the case when they've gone through a slightly dodgy broker, and that's something we're really trying to tackle in the energy market for businesses, because there are some brilliant brokers out there, but there are a lot of quite badly behaved, very opaque brokers who hide in a lot of extra costs that really a business shouldn't be paying. So that's probably one of our main barriers. And then I think for the businesses that are really engaged and have become really excited about renewable energy, the ones that are coming to us now are saying that we've got a little bit of roof space, we've got a little bit of land, we'd love to start generating our own electricity. How do we do that? And I think the main thing that we're hoping to focus on now is working out the best business model to help businesses that want to kind of take it one step further and go extra green, and just work out how it makes sense financially for them. So that's what we're looking at the moment. Love the idea of kind of having a rent-a-roof situation, or businesses coming together to create a network of solar panels, for example, that feeds back into the local community. So that's what we're looking at the moment.
So I've got a question, if I may, and that is in the city particularly, most of the businesses we're in are owned by someone else, and they of course could well be somewhere else physically and psychologically. I did actually, I have a building in the centre, it's also in a conservation area, which up till now the planning has been, there's no way you're going to mess with the roof. Maybe that will change, who knows. But one of the things I have done, and I know Octopus help with this, is I joined a thing that a company called Ripple Energy have got.
Oh yeah.
And that is where there will be, you join a cooperative where they find a place to put energy into the grid, and
Yes.
you benefit as a person or a business from having energy poked into the grid somewhere. And so, of course, if you move or if your building isn't suitable for your own solar power, it's also a much cheaper operation in terms of the investment. And that seemed to be a good way for me and my businesses to evolve. I know Octopus then provide the energy at the other end of that. So I'm being too vague. If you know about that, Marina, do you say?
I do. I think what we're also trying to do, what we're looking to do at a kind of more granular domestic customer level as well, is we're looking to have sort of invest in wind turbines and solar farms, whereby that energy from those farms goes straight back into the local community, so avoids all those large network grid costs that that you have to pay, but also beyond that, getting local customers actually also putting a little bit of money in themselves into so investing in the solar farm, and then eventually making money long term, but also benefiting from that lower cost of energy, and becoming really engaged in the kind of decentralized grid approach. So that's definitely a model that we really like with Ripple Energy, and we're looking to repeat it as well with getting, you know, customers, even if it's just sort of £10, but a kind of crowded investor approach.
I think it's also worth, just if I may, I think it's also worth just mentioning there's a couple of good local energy cooperatives around in Leicestershire as well. So there's Green Fox and Harbour Energy, who both offer a kind of a localised version of that. But actually there might be some power in bringing those together with someone like Octopus in order to provide that sort of sense of scale and ability for businesses and people to take part in a renewable energy scheme.
So we've got a question saying, we mentioned to Gavin, you mentioned 300 million coming from MEH. Over what period, and is the funding applied for through the various LEPs or direct from, say, the local authority?
So it's a share of 300 million. So there's 5 energy hubs across England, so we're getting a portion of that. And it's going to be directed through, well, we're still trying to figure out the actual delivery mechanism. Usually these things are competitions where a local authority will say, well, we could do this for this much. We're looking at trying to do it in a more democratic way and actually putting the funding straight through local authorities across the Midlands. So there would be a portion of that would go into households in Leicester, a portion that would go in through districts and boroughs. So we're working with local authorities to scope that out properly. And the period is next financial year. So it's a 1 year.
So can you just maybe each of you come in and say, what are you aware of in our area where those that are notably divorced from this whole debate, energy poverty or indeed physical poverty or small businesses, various of you are doing things to try and ensure that the whole of our society benefits. Does anyone want to come in on what each one is doing at the moment? I'm sorry, looking at Anna really, because that's a council. I know strong to council. Also, yeah. Dr Shamir is keen on it. Anna.
Okay, so in terms of the City Council, the manifesto commitments within the City Council for this term of office are delivering on the climate emergency and getting to carbon neutral as near as possible by 2030. Looking at anti-poverty strategy for the city and dealing with anti-poverty and looking at growing the economy. So those 3 things are very clearly linked in the council's key priorities that it's delivering on. In terms of practically dealing with those, the climate emergency is linking across the Climate Emergency Action Plan is linking across the anti-poverty issues, the support to businesses. So Green Bell is an example of a project which is actually directed out to SMEs to try and make that difference to people's bottom line. Really, it's about supporting SMEs in delivering. And I know it is really hard times for all companies out there, but it's an opportunity for companies to become more energy efficient, but also to become more efficient in the practices and what they're doing. I mean, I could speak for a long time about the domestic sector and all the things going on in anti-poverty, so I won't start doing that now. But yes.
I mean, as far as I'm aware, the people that come to work for us as business owners are also the people who have poverty issues at home in many cases. And so we mustn't forget them just because they are not obviously on our radar. We pay wages. Dr. Shamir, do you want to come back on anything particular? Because you were first to speak and there's been other people after you.
No, thank you. And I just want to thank my sort of co-panelists for really kind of bringing to life so much of what is actually already happening in Leicester, where I live, but equally, really appreciate the fact that I recently transferred energy supply to Octopus, so that was a bit of a lucky win, wasn't it? So I think just in reality is that we've heard so many fantastic examples of what organizations can do, small businesses can do, the access that they have to a whole range of sort of measures and grants and funding vehicles, and clearly with the work that Gavin and Anna are doing, there will be more to come. So I think if anything people would take away from this session is that there are absolutely a whole range of opportunities ahead for them, and I would just actively encourage anyone on this call and other members of LBV to really follow through and sit and take those opportunities, because that's often what I see at a national level and around the world, is that when there are sort of interventions and policy instruments at play where organizations aren't aware, or maybe the educational gap is a bit too wide in terms of people feeling, well, it wouldn't really apply to me, I'm not going to bother, I'll never get through all of this or whatever. That's a real shame and a real missed opportunity. And I think just by some of the conversations coming through on the thread, clearly some of the members of LBV are clearly going to be taking up on these opportunities. So we're going to have a very busy panel following this call.
I certainly am. So also there's a bald pitch from Andrew Trevett at the university, which is good, saying, first of all, thanks for promoting Leicester Innovation Hub, because there is a lot of money going into that, people innovating, but also that Leicester University themselves are looking for businesses currently to benefit from the research and expertise that they have on climate change, and that is a free service as well. So there are within the other two universities as well in our patch, which is Loughborough and of course at DMU, a lot of work going on for new research to help businesses and organizations become more effective. But of course, as far as business people are concerned, it's all about improving the health of our business long term. And it really is quite an exciting area. So if we're all panicking about what's going on, I certainly should be looking into this. Embarrassed that I didn't know, I have a small data center at the back behind the Belmont Hotel, which uses a lot of electricity. We don't own the building. It's got a flat roof that's below the site, in the cloudy areas, under trees, but there must be something we can do. So, and I've been certainly looking into that. And that's sort of how I hope people will be thinking, what can I do? Actually go and look for something. So question from Graham is, how does Leicester compare to other cities in respect of our carbon emissions, and do we collaborate with others to share the best practice? I think I know the answer, but
okay, yes, I can answer that. Right, historically we have a higher energy use in manufacturing because we are a manufacturing city. So in the business sector, our energy use has been higher in business, and it has been slightly lower in the domestic sector per capita, and that probably represents the terraced housing and probably fuel poverty actually in the city, I have to say. So traditionally that has been the case. when you look at the data that we currently get from national government, it's based on modelling. So we don't have data which lists all the wonderful actions that Octopus are taking, or the City Council, or other members of the LEP, or other businesses are doing in the city that has an impact on our carbon. We have this model data that comes from government, which models it by sector. So when you look at us compared to Nottingham, Bristol, and Leeds and Manchester, who probably would be our comparators, those are the people we look to as doing work in these areas. We all follow a very similar trajectory, but our trajectory was slightly higher than Bristol's to start with, lower than Manchester's, but they're all coming down in a similar pattern, and that is because that's based upon the national decarbonising of the grid, largely. So that as the grid, national electricity grid, is decarbonised, then the rates of carbon have fallen. None of those figures take any account of what we call Scope 3 emissions, which is all the purchasing of goods and services that we all do, and the Leicester City Council is a big purchaser of goods and services, which then obviously have their own carbon emissions. So whenever we import something from China, the actual life cycle analysis and the carbon produced in creating and producing that product, we're not recording currently. So I hope that gives an overview. I could talk about that for a long time, that subject. And yes, we do keep up with best practice with what we regard are the key other authorities in the UK working in this area. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you. Okay, so I need to bring this to a close, otherwise the screen will go blank anyway. First of all, thank you, Anna, thank you, Gavin, thank you, Marina, and thank you, Shamir, for your input. It is early days. The presentations, will be there on the LBV website, .co.uk. Sorry, I said .com last time. Please do look at it and look at the presentations again, because if you haven't looked at any of this stuff in the past, it'll just be voices in the wind. But do look, there's opportunities for businesses, really, us, particularly the SMEs. So I must also thank Robin and the guys from Starcom who have made this happen. And lastly, of course, for you who showed an interest in this, our members who showed an interest in this subject. And there's a lot to take away, and I'd like to thank you very much for coming for that. And Robin, our next event is, I can't remember that. Oh, it's time. It's within the business. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, the next event is focusing on the around the, I believe, on in terms of the business support program. So if you go onto the events page on LBV, you get the details for that one there.
Okay, and we're also working within the business festival as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
All right, well, thank you so much. I draw this meeting to a close. Thank you. Bye. Turn off your cameras and your mics. Thank you.